Howdy, partners. Ever wondered what life was like in the Wild West? Well, saddle up, because today we're diving into the top crazy things that were considered normal back in the day. So, hold on to your hats and get ready for a wild ride as we uncover the gritty truth about life in the Wild West. You ever heard the expression, justice is served? Well, back in the Wild West, they served it up hot, and they served it in public. Imagine this, you're strolling through town, maybe looking for a cold sarsaparilla, and you see a crowd gathering. That's right, folks, it's hanging day. Public hangings weren't some hushed, somber affair. They were a spectacle, a community event. People would come from miles around to witness the grim event, bringing their kids, their lunches, even placing bets on how long the condemned would dance at the end of a rope. The gallows stood tall in the town square, a stark reminder of the law. The sheriff, often a figure of both respect and fear, would oversee the proceedings, ensuring that justice was carried out to the letter. The townsfolk, dressed in their Sunday best, would gather around, chatting and waiting for the main event. It was a social occasion, a break from the monotony of daily life. As the condemned was led to the gallows, the crowd would fall silent, the air thick with anticipation. The noose, a simple yet terrifying device, would be placed around the neck of the unfortunate soul. The sheriff would read out the charges and the sentence, reminding everyone of the crime committed and the price to be paid. It was a lesson for all, a stark warning of the consequences of breaking the law. The trapdoor would open and the condemned would drop, the crowd watching intently. Some would cheer, others would look away, but all would remember the sight. Public hangings were a way to deter crime, to show folks that there were consequences for stepping out of line. It was a harsh, brutal form of justice, but in those wild, lawless days, it was deemed necessary. So next time you hear the phrase, justice is served, remember the gallows of the Wild West, where justice was swift, public, and unforgettable. It was a different time, a different world, where the law was often as wild as the land itself. But one thing was clear. Justice, in all its grim forms, was a spectacle that no one could ignore. Forget your duels at dawn with fancy pistols and 10 paces. In the Wild West, disagreements were settled with lead, and they weren't always pretty. Saloons, those dens of whiskey and rowdiness, were prime locations for gunfights. Imagine the scene. A card game gone wrong, a drunken insult, and suddenly the air is thick with tension and the smell of gunpowder. It was a dangerous time, and those who survived learned to be quick on the draw and even quicker to duck for cover. Now let's talk about a different kind of frontier establishment, the brothel. In a time when men outnumbered women 10 to 1, these houses of ill repute, as they were called, served a very real purpose. For cowboys, miners, and other men far from home, a visit to a brothel offered companionship, a listening ear, and maybe a little something extra. Some were opulent palaces of pleasure, while others were little more than shacks on the edge of town. In a world with few options for female companionship, brothels became an accepted part of life in the Wild West. Chapter 4. Snake Oil Salesmen, Separating Fools from Their Gold. Ever heard the saying, there's a sucker born every minute? Well, in the Wild West, those suckers were prime targets for snake oil salesmen. These cunning individuals were the epitome of deceit, traveling from town to town with their wagons full of so-called miracle cures. They'd set up shop in bustling marketplaces, drawing crowds with their charismatic pitches and elaborate shows. The atmosphere was often like a carnival, with curious onlookers eager to hear about the latest wonder drug. These traveling hucksters would roll into town, promising miracle cures and magical elixirs. They'd spin tall tales of exotic ingredients and miraculous recoveries, preying on the hopes and fears of a desperate and often gullible public. The salesmen were adept at creating a sense of urgency, convincing people that they needed to buy the elixir right then and there, or miss out on a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. They'd often stage fake testimonials, with accomplices in the crowd claiming to have been cured of various ailments. Tonics laced with alcohol, opium, and who knows what else were peddled as remedies for everything from baldness to consumption. These concoctions were often more harmful than beneficial, but the allure of a quick fix was too tempting for many to resist. These snake oil salesmen were masters of persuasion, playing on the fears and desires of their audience. They understood human psychology well, knowing exactly which buttons to push to make a sale. Their legacy is a cautionary tale, reminding us to always be skeptical of too good to be true promises. Chapter 5. Mail Order Brides. Love in the time of postage stamps. Finding love in the Wild West wasn't always easy, especially if you were a man surrounded by other dusty, unshaven prospectors. That's where the mail order bride business came in. Women, often from the East Coast or even Europe, would answer ads placed by lonely bachelors in newspapers and catalogs. They'd exchange letters, photographs, and if things went well, agree to marry sight unseen. It was a gamble for sure, but for some, it was a chance at a new life, a fresh start, and maybe even love in the most unexpected of places. Chapter 6. Vigilante Justice. When the law was a distant whisper. In the Wild West, justice wasn't always found in a courtroom. With lawmen spread thin and outlaws running rampant, folks often took the law into their own hands. Vigilante groups, fueled by a thirst for vengeance or simply a desire for order, would hunt down criminals, meting out punishment without the benefit of a trial or a jury. It was a brutal form of justice, often driven by fear and anger. But in a world where the law was often absent, it was a way to maintain some semblance of order. Chapter 7. Saloon Culture, where whiskey flowed and tempers flared. If the walls of saloons could talk, they'd tell tales of wild nights, drunken brawls, and the clinking of gold coins. These watering holes were the social hubs of the Wild West, where cowboys, miners, and drifters gathered to blow off steam and share stories. Saloons were more than just places to drink. They were makeshift town halls, gambling dens, and entertainment venues, all rolled into one. But be warned, these establishments could turn rowdy in a heartbeat. Chapter 8. Gold Rush Fever. Dreams of Riches, Reality of Chaos. The mid-1800s saw a frenzy of activity as news of gold discoveries spread like wildfire. People from all walks of life, from seasoned miners to hopeful dreamers, packed their bags and headed west. Gold. The very word held the promise of riches beyond imagination, drawing thousands to the west with dreams of striking it rich. The journey was arduous, with many facing treacherous conditions just to reach the gold fields. But the reality of the gold rush was often far different from the romanticized stories. The harsh environment, backbreaking labor, and the constant threat of illness made life incredibly tough. Competition for gold was fierce, and life in these boomtowns was often chaotic and dangerous. Lawlessness was rampant, with disputes over claims frequently leading to violence. For every lucky prospector who struck gold, countless others went bust, their dreams turning to dust. Many found themselves penniless, having spent their life savings on a futile quest. The gold rush was a testament to the power of greed and the allure of quick riches, a time when fortunes were made and lost in the blink of an eye. It was a period marked by both incredible triumphs and devastating failures, shaping the history and culture of the American West. Chapter 9. Buffalo Hunting, a tragedy of epic proportions. Imagine a sea of buffalo stretching as far as the eye can see, millions strong, roaming the Great Plains. Now picture this. Within a few short decades, those herds are decimated, driven to the brink of extinction. The railroads that brought settlers west also brought professional hunters who killed buffalo by the thousands, leaving their carcasses to rot in the sun. The near extinction of the buffalo stands as a stark reminder of the devastating impact human greed can have on the natural world. Chapter 10. Frontier Medicine, Whiskey, Leeches, and a Prayer. Forget your fancy hospitals and antibiotics. In the Wild West, if you got sick or injured, well, you were in for a rough ride. Medical practices were, let's just say, a bit more, shall we say, hands-on. Infections were common and often fatal. Doctors didn't know much about germs, and sterilization wasn't exactly a priority. But amidst the quackery and the crude practices, there were dedicated doctors and healers who did their best with what little they had. Outro. So long, partner. Thanks for joining us on this wild ride through history. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more fascinating stories from the past.